We traveled all the way to Las Vegas for CES 2017 to check out the best new tech releases for this year and the near future, and to also meet the new Panasonic camera that we pre-ordered before the trip, the Lumix GH5. This highly anticipated addition to the mirrorless camera lineup and upgrade to the GH4 has been in development by Panasonic for the last 3 years, and it seriously stole the show. To start, the GH5 shoots 4K at 24 or 30 frames per second with 422 10-bit internal recording at 150 megabits per second. And with a planned firmware update, it will do 400 megabits per second at 10 bits internally. Basically, what 422 means is you'll get a ton of extra color depth, letting you grade your footage to an even larger degree, kind of like a photo RAW file, but for video when using log color space. The GH5 can also shoot 4K up to 60 frames per second, but not at 422, only at 420 at 150 megabits per second, and up to 180 frames per second in full HD 1080p at 420. Panasonic has planned firmware updates unlocking 200 megabits 1080p at 422 10-bit, 6K anamorphic shooting, and hybrid log gamma for HDR, so get those HDR TVs ready. And by touching the waters of 4K cinema camera territory, the GH5 can output 422 10-bit 4K at 60 frames per second externally via the HDMI port, which is nuts for a camera for $2,000. Like the GH4, it has a micro Four Thirds sensor, but the GH5 has no crop when shooting video in 4K like the GH4 did. This leads to sharper images and reduced noise. Panasonic has also removed the low-pass filter and improved the GH4's 16-megapixel sensor to a 20-megapixel sensor for the GH5 for 6K photos, resulting in amazing still images. The GH5 has the highest ISO performance of any Micro Four Thirds Lumix ever, thanks to the new Venus engine. Panasonic enhanced the autofocus from the GH4 by adding 4 focus modes. They increased the GH4's AF from 48 points to 225 points of autofocus on the GH5 with DFD system and Venus engine. Selecting a custom focus point on the larger LCD touchscreen is a breeze. The GH5 also has autofocus pull, which lets you set 3 different focus positions, and the camera will automatically pull focus. Autofocus tracking will automatically keep the subject in focus as it moves through the shot via area or face detection. But will these 4 AF modes only work with Panasonic lenses? To help eliminate pesky, shaky, and out-of-focus footage from handheld shooting, Panasonic gave the GH5 dual image stabilization. Yes, that's 2, an in-body 5-axis and an on-lens stabilization. It will be interesting to see how the stabilization works with adapters like Metabones and non-Panasonic lenses like Canon's and Sony's. Some other new features include a dual SD card slot for continuous shooting. Plus, to accompany the headphone jack and microphone input, Panasonic added a full-sized HDMI and a USB 3.1 Type-C port, which is insanely fast. The GH5 is also splash-proof, dust-proof, and freeze-proof, and incredibly light thanks to the magnesium body. Panasonic installed an electronic viewfinder, which you can now use while recording in 4K to help get the perfect shot when dealing with bright lights and the sun. The new joystick simplifies menu navigation and selecting autofocus points. Its magnesium body keeps the weight down, and it just feels great in your hand. It's very comfortable to hold. To ease your transition to the GH5, it uses the same batteries as previous Lumix cameras like the G7, GH3, and GH4. Panasonic has seriously upgraded the audio capabilities of the GH5, now letting you add the DMW XLR1 adapter, which connects right onto the hut shoe of the camera and will provide 2 XLR connections. You will have 2 independent levels and settings for each input, and phantom power. For simple shoots, you can still plug a mic directly into the camera via 3.5mm. Despite all of these great new features, we're still left with some questions, like dynamic range. The GH4 gave us 12.5 steps, so I'm hoping we get a bump up to 13 or 14. We also assume that Panasonic will release an update to their app to wirelessly control the GH5, although we heard no news about it. How will the GH5 work with non-Panasonic lenses and adapters like a Metabones? We clearly saw an adapter on at least one of the GH5s, so we're curious how it will perform with our Canon lenses. Will any of the autofocus and image stabilization features be disabled? We shot CES using our Lumix G7 with Canon lenses and a Metabones adapter, and autofocus was disabled, which was kind of annoying. And speaking of Canon, they better get their act together soon, as the competition for prosumer 4K cameras is turning fierce. If they do upgrade the C100 Mark III to 4K recording, why would you spend $6,000 on that when you can spend $2,000 on the exceptional GH5? Especially if it doesn't do 422 400 megabits per second and no bump to 14 stops of dynamic range. We get Super 35 using our Metabones adapter with Canon lenses on the G7. Are you listening, Canon? I'm a loyal user. All in all, I seriously relished playing with the GH5. It was very user-friendly, everything was easy to find, it felt great, and the footage looked incredible in person. Click up top for a link of Panasonic's footage they were playing at CES. The GH5 will be released sometime in March 2017 and is available for pre-order right now. We here at QMV are very excited about the new addition to our camera family and can't wait to get it. Most importantly, what should we name the camera? Leave any suggestions below. And just so you know, we shot this video on the Lumix G7, same thing with CES, and when we get our GH5, we'll be doing an in-depth review of the footage that we get with it, and we'll compare it to the G7. Thanks for watching.